What's going on, everybody? I hope everyone is having a fantastic Thursday night. We are here with the man, the myth, the legend, Luke Winstel from Clemson Sports. Luke, it's an honor to have you on, man. We're really excited to talk some Clemson Tiger and Miami Hurricanes football with yourself, but also, man, we're dying for air here as Miami Hurricanes fans. The past couple weeks have been horrendous. I mean, one of the worst horrendous play making decisions, however you want to. It was just off. I don't even want to talk about it. I want to throw up just making the statement, Luke. And then our quarterback, Tyler Van Dyke, just, I mean, three, three INTs against UNC. We get slapped in the face. It's just been rough the past couple weeks, Luke. Um, Hopefully, we can beat Clemson, but my hopes are low. Luke, what do you think about this matchup, man? It really is an interesting one for both programs.
Yeah, it sure is. We were talking about it briefly before the show. One side or the other is going to be really upset. So it's one of those games that, hey, both of these teams are not going to be in the college football playoff. I hate having to say it at this point in the season, but there is a bit of a high stakes feel, at least from where I'm sensing the perspective here, because for Clemson, there's the understanding that Miami's talented, so you get a win. Yes, this is a quality win. If you defeat the Miami offense, obviously it's quality. There's so much talent there and a lot of respect. But the thing for Clemson is if you lose this game, yes, losing to Miami, they're a good team, but you look at the big picture and you say, "Oh man, this is a 4-3 record to begin the season. What has happened to Clemson football?" Because it's been slipping. You guys have seen that. I mean, even if you've just watched Clemson versus Miami in the past couple of years, the trajectory and the results are not what they used to be, and they're not even what they could be. And there's different things we can get into there of talent acquisition and seeming like Clemson's played with one hand behind their back. There's impacts of that, and if one of the impacts of that were to be that Clemson starts the year 4-3 and gets off to the third season that you're starting to say in a row, what's going on here? That's where the questions start to come. That's where, on the Miami side, if they lose, I know you guys have talked about what's happened or what could happen there. So it's a game that, sure, not really playoff implications, the winner's not getting in, but it's the kind of high stakes battle. And where I'm looking personally at the matchup, and this is something that immediately jumps off the page. You've got a top 10 defense in the FBS in Clemson. They are fifth in the FBS in total defense right now. And they've had some quality opponents and quality offenses in there. So I feel comfortable that that number is somewhere in the right spot. But then Miami, seventh in total offense, over 500 yards a game. I know there's been ups and downs there, but just looking strictly numerically there, that brings up an intriguing fact of Clemson's defensive line is still an embarrassment of riches. The recruiting there has been really good. The talent's coming through. So the defensive line, what kind of pressure can you put on Van Dyke? Can you stop the run game and force him to be an all-world or an all-American type of quarterback with his arm to get the points scored? So for Clemson, I'm looking at the defensive line, the run-stopping ability. They're coming off a game against Wake Forest, and I know it's Wake Forest, but they had 4 sacks and 8 TFLs to my count in that game. So they're coming in riding high. So defensively versus the Miami offense, and just knowing that, hey, there's, obviously been the down moments there in offense, but a lot of ups and a lot of 500 plus yard performances. So just understanding that that's the matchup I'm watching. The other things might be a little more question marks of Clemson's offense, who shows up. 17 points against Wake Forest is not exactly world beating. And there was a sense of, yes, Clemson rushes a team for over 200 yards. That's nice, but it felt in some ways they'd limped into the bye week offensively and needed that extra week to calm things down, make sure everybody's healthy. And from the Clemson side, Coach Sweeney's talked about how they feel like they're as healthy as they've been all year. So hopefully for them, that's happening at the right time. So the matchup, Miami's going to see the best that Clemson's got here. And that's the way that I'm looking at it so far.
Earlier before we jumped on here, you had mentioned that you kind of were starting to see the defense kind of peak. You're starting to see them kind of come together a little bit more. What were the early season struggles that you were seeing from them, and what have they corrected along the way?
some of the things, the Duke game almost feels like an anomaly at this point of just how bad some of those plays and how bad some of those moments were. But as you move through the season, you're starting to see things mesh. And it was one that so much talent had graduated on the front. You look at, or graduated or left for the draft between Brissy and Miles Murphy and KJ Henry, and then some of the other reserve guys that had graduated. And it was a who's going to step up, the freshman class, the recruits. If you follow the ESPN 300 or those kind of numbers, you knew Clemson had some of those coming in. Well, now they've gotten an opportunity. Instead of playing 15 snaps to start the season, they've earned 20, 25, 27, 28 snaps in some points, and significantly increasing that and proving that they can provide value. So defensively, Clemson's got a lot of depth, and the defensive line feels like an embarrassment of riches because of how quickly the depth has come in of Peter Woods and Tamarion Parker. You'll hear it on TV if you're not there in person. The commentators, obviously, they love the freshmen that can be All-Americans. So whether they do anything or not, their names are going to be called. So you're going to hear these people. So it's something to watch out for, number 11 and number 12 on the defense. Those two freshmen, they're going to get airtime. They're probably going to make a couple of plays. They rotate in. They do at Clemson this kind of co-starter thing, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but they'll have the freshmen sometimes co-starting with guys like Rook on defense and Tyler Davis as well, who's a sneaky guy in terms of the NFL draft. People are not blowing him up on ESPN right now, but that's a player that's probably a second or third round pick, fourth at the latest, and makes an impact because of his position. He's not quite as heralded, but that's someone that when Miami tries to run the ball, if you see that big number 13 in the middle, that's what he does. So because the fronts come together, the linebacking group was never really in question for Clemson. It was going to be, as long as the guys didn't get hurt, and Trotters missed some time, but Barrett Carter out of Atlanta. So I'm from Atlanta, so I kind of have heard his name for a long time at this point. And, played big time high school ball and translated, and last year had a big breakout year. And now we're talking about maybe he's a top 50 pick or a second round pick somewhere in there. Same with Trotter, as long as he's healthy and good to go. That's what we're looking at. So defensively for Clemson, it's come together. The linebackers were good. The DBs, Nate Wiggins is kind of a no-fly zone number one corner. And Ronald, you're dead on here. The defense it was okay at the beginning of the year, but it's really come together. Top 5 unit. So when you break it down, that's what I'm seeing. Depth on the D-line. We knew the linebackers were going to be NFL caliber talents. Nate Wiggins has some people saying he's a first-round pick. I'm not sure if I'm ready to make that jump yet, but I'll go top 50 with you on Nate Wiggins. So it's a good player, and then the other guys around him are all solid. There's some solid depth and solid experience in the back half. So if there's any worry on the Clemson side, it would be when you have your second tier of defensive backs or going to nickel package and things get a little tougher. The depth is not quite as good, but it's still good enough. So, yeah, dead on there. Defense is really peaking at the right time, it seems.
For anybody who hasn't seen Clemson this year or just hasn't had a chance to kind of catch up on everything that they do, what kind of defensive scheme in general does the Clemson defense run?
Yeah, so you're going to see a lot of 4-3 there, and you're going to see we've seen a lot of nickel, and the nickel has been intriguing because of the injuries, and obviously you never want to have injuries, but we've been wondering, for me as someone that covers recruiting and covers the state of Georgia, there were some defensive backs that were brought in, and that was a position of need. They brought in 6 last year to be true freshmen this year. And it was like, okay, some of these guys have got to contribute at some point early. And when they've gone into nickel, which they do fairly often on passing downs, and they've gotten very comfortable with that, having Khalil Barnes and Avion Terrell, if you know the Terrell name, AJ Terrell, Atlanta Falcons first rounder, this is little brother here. And Avion, doesn't feel like that. He's one that was really big in high school at the beginning of the recruiting process and kind of fell off in the rankings. And now he's kind of showed, okay, I was the guy that you guys originally thought I was. So he's in there. Khalil Barnes skyrocketed. He was a bit of a late bloomer in high school. So those two guys have come in as recruits and now settle into the nickel spot. So your nickel package, if you're Miami, I'm looking at, hey, when Clemson's in nickel, there's a freshman on the field. And for someone like Tyler Van Dyke, that might be something you try to exploit. And the freshmen have made plays and they've impressed Clemson fans. But there's also the element of, hey, is that somebody? Is there a point where some of the weaker corners get out there, maybe a Jaden Lucas that has had some moments, but also some not as great moments in there of, are these types of players that you look at and target? So for Miami fans, that's one thing to keep an eye on. But when Clemson's in their 4-3 and their base defense, it's really tough to run on them. You're looking at the middle of the field. You've got these big cloggers, Tyler Davis and Rook and Peter Woods, and the linebackers fly around. So those are kind of the looks that you see from Clemson, but I feel very comfortable, especially early downs in the base defense of getting the other team behind the sticks. And then that's a way that they've really established themselves. Just, technically the way that you'd want to in a 4-3.
Hey, Luke. Offensively, this year has not been the Clemson standard of years past. I understand, you had DJ Ugalanga. Didn't work out with him. You switched to Cade Klubnik. You bring in the offensive coordinator from TCU. It really hasn't had that spark yet. What's holding this Clemson offense from taking off?
Yeah, this is one that it depends on who you ask, and it depends on, oh man. So since you're asking me, there's been some talk about the wide receiver group, and some people, there's arguments both ways that are valid. So I want to kind of show respect to, yes, there are some guys in the room that have done good things. There's the real absence of an alpha at receiver, and that's an issue. There's not that one guy that you look at, for example, when you got DeAndre Hopkins on the field and it's 3rd and long and you need a conversion, what are you doing? Everybody knows where the ball is going, and that's perfectly okay because he's still going to make the play. And those are the kinds of things that red zone threat, there's the guy. There's been opportunities for a lot of people to step up, and no one's become the alpha at receiver. So yes, that is one issue. Now, that's the issue that a lot of fans talk about, and that's something that I obviously care about because those are big names. If you want to talk about the real issue, it's the offensive line. There's been some real struggles with the offensive line, and that's something that coming into the season, there's a reporter in Georgia, Brooks Austin, that I see often on the recruiting trail, covers UGA, and he was like, man, that offensive line. He's like, go back and watch that Orange Bowl one more time and just only watch the offensive, because he's an offensive lineman, so that's what he sees. And I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, there were plenty of problems. I'll take your word for it. So I went back and watched it, and I was like, oh, man, these are the guys that are returning, and it's not inspiring. And then now Clemson's lost one of their starters on the interior offensive line, or on the starting offensive line as well, I should say. And that's really hurting the run game. It's something that, hasn't crippled the run game to where they can't run, but it's definitely a difference when you don't have Walker Parks in there. So the offensive line is one that, did you watch the Florida State game? What was the difference in that game? It was that mess up in protection and not having that quite right. And maybe you don't blame the offensive line. Maybe it's on the running back, but the miscommunications and just the protection of the quarterback in general, if you don't want to just say offensive line, the protection's been tough on Cade. They have not made things as easy as you would like to for a young quarterback. Of you want to have the safety blanket tight end that you can use all the time. And people thought that Jake Briningstool could do that, and he's probably an NFL caliber talent, but he's not a key part of the offense, so that seems like a bit of a disconnect as well. There's several things of don't have the alpha receiver. There's been, not the tight end production that gives a safety blanket to a young quarterback, and then the protection of Cade has been tough. I think there's been some hesitancy from him that he's had to overcome and just be willing to take a hit and be confident. So there's a number of issues that we have seen. There's still decent numbers in the offense. Klubnik is a good player. There's people like Tyler Brown that have had some good games and started to step up as a young receiver, but it's not there yet. It's not clicking. And if Clemson's going to go by the motto, the best is the standard, then they need to know that there's still a lot to improve, and the fans are looking at that. And this is something that against a team like Miami, the offense has got to show up, because this is a game that, even though Clemson's defense is good, Miami's going to have their moments. So you have to be able to match. And that's the real key, is just which Clemson offense are we going to see? Which version? We've had some really good ones this season, but it's also been some rough ones, as you know.
Luke, we're such in a weird place in college football. we're bringing in NIL, the transfer portal. Dabo
Mhm.
Sweeney has never tapped into the transfer portal, believe it or not, for people who don't follow the Clemson football program. He's not a believer of it. Maybe he's part of the good side of, college football history. I appreciate that as a coach that, you don't have to bring in free agents from other programs. You can build within the guys you recruit. And I think that's a good recruiting tool for a lot of players, especially coming out of high school where their spots aren't going to be taken from someone else from another Division I program or another college football program, wherever they come from. Um, do you like that Dabo Sweeney doesn't tap into the transfer portal at all, or do you see other programs and you're quite jealous of it?
This is a question that I think is really hard for people around Clemson because you've got the aspect of you love to be the guy that says, "Hey, I'm doing things the right way, the classic way. Like I'm not going to go and buy a team or do or whatever words people say." Quite frankly, and maybe this is because of me being a younger guy and hanging around some of these people and players and seeing the impact of not using the portal. I'm just not into the strategy right now that Clemson's using. This is a personal opinion here. It's one that I think a lot of reporters and people around Clemson try to buy into it of, hey, Dabo, you know, this past year they'll tell you that, oh, Clemson didn't have any spots open, so they couldn't take anybody from the portal because they had people return that they didn't think would return. But we all know roster management, if Deion Sanders taught you anything, there's a way to make roster spots if you want to make roster spots. But Clemson won't do it. And I understand, when you offer a guy a scholarship, you're going to keep it that way and keep your word. But there's also a point where there were some real positions of need. There were positions that weren't good last year, and I'm not sure how they were expected to be better this year, just in terms of talent acquisition. Having a base as a recruiting guy, this is how I've gotten into the football side and the football writing things. Talent acquisition is the key. And, coaching and everything helps, but you got to have the players. And there's been some good evaluations on this staff and things to praise them for, but there's also been some bad evaluations. And when you combine the fact that you miss on evaluations because you're human and every coach does, then you're losing. If you're a school like Clemson, NFL players are coming out, NFL teams want your players. You're losing guys early to the draft if they're good enough, and a lot of times they are. And then you're also losing double-digit guys to the portal last year, and you're losing your starting quarterback to the portal, which plenty of people were happy about, and I get that, but losing key pieces and losing depth at receiver, losing a linebacker that's now starting at Colorado. And you look at, okay, now you're losing talent, not just from graduation in the draft, but from the portal. You're just going to replace that with high school kids. And you're not really doing NIL with the high school kids like a school like Miami is. Yes, they have collectives. Yes, they're, the idea that Clemson doesn't deal in NIL is a little crazy. They do. There's no doubt about that. Peter Woods even talked about it on national TV at the All-American game. He mentioned that. But the idea that they're not aggressively going after people with NIL, they're not aggressively using the portal, it's a real problem. You're seeing the effects of it. You're seeing that, sure, there are spots on the roster that they've recruited, but you're losing guys in all these different ways because that's how rosters flow. And you're just, hey, here's a crop of 25 high school kids. Clemson's going to be right back where it was. And you're also looking at a coaching staff that there are some questions about. There are some guys that you try to promote from within, and sometimes it doesn't work out. And there was a mistake basically admitted by Dabo Sweeney in firing Brandon Streeter last year of, hey, I promoted from within and didn't work. And then Clemson went and did what a brand like Clemson can do. You go get the top offensive coordinator target that was available and bring him in. And there's been a notable improvement in the offense. I think there's a lot more to come. It's one of those that it's hard to sit here and say, hey, let's be patient. But year one, there's encouraging signs. There's play calls. I say, oh, I love that design, or that was a great call. And things like quarterback sneaking on the goal line and getting in with some of the trends now and doing some of that offensively has been nice. But yeah, with the Portland NIL stuff, I don't agree with it. They've gotten into the collective space a good bit more lately and into signing players to deals and having, autograph deals and different appearances. But the way that they've gone about talent acquisition is like playing with one hand tied behind your back. And as you're watching schools like Miami and Florida State right now, if you look at the On3 rankings in recruiting, they're number 1 and number 2. FSU number 1, Miami number 2. And then you got Clemson number 3. And that might not change unless Clemson can pick things up with their talent acquisition of finding ways to utilize NIL, finding ways that if you're lagging a little bit behind in high school recruiting, you go back in the portal and have a top 10, top 20 portal class and do what these other teams have done to now potentially catch up to you. If Miami wins, it's a statement that makes it look like, hey, Florida State caught up to you, and now maybe Miami's caught up to you. And then where are you now if you're Clemson? And do you change? Do you still sit there and say, we're going to keep doing it our way, even though it's not working? Do you go down with the ship, or do you change? And I think that the change is definitely needed.
Has Cade Klubnik, the quarterback, has he shown an ability to be able to adapt as games go on?
Good question. I think that as games go on, a little tougher. The thing that I can definitely measure just off eye test, and I think even numbers would show this. You look at quarterback rating, for example, if that's a number you like. I know not everybody likes it, but it's one of the best ones we have, I think. So it improves game to game. And with Cade lately, from the beginning of the season, obviously starting on a low note, but understanding that, hey, he's still only started, about less than 10 games in his career. So we've seen game by game improvement. There's things like, even this is eye test stuff, poise, pocket presence, two buzzwords for us in media, right? Well, you can see it. You can see, does he look like he's seeing ghosts? Does he look like he's a deer in the headlights? And there were moments that things might have trended towards that way earlier in the season, that now he's more calm, again, willing to sit in the pocket and make his reads and maybe take a hit, and looking more and more like the pocket presences that we've seen in the past from Clemson quarterbacks. Dabo Swinney, his press conferences are not exactly something that I set in stone every time he says something, but it is one that when he makes a comparison of Taj Boyd back in his first year, reminds him of Cade now in his first year as a starter. When he explained the parallels, I was like, I see. That makes a lot of sense. Of some things that he said would make Chad Morris want to eat his headset when Taj Boyd was there. But there were the flashes. And with Klubnik, we've seen the flashes, and we've seen a lot of lows, but we've seen for every low, he's learned from it. And we're seeing that he's matured as a quarterback in this short period of time because of the being thrown into the fire and having a rough start in ACC play. We have seen the maturation. We have seen the numbers of in the beginning. I think that when receivers weren't open or things weren't happening on their side, it was like, oh man, what do we do? But now for Cade, I think he's shown an ability to help elevate the play of some of his receivers. Of a guy like Tyler Brown, the offense and Coach Riley know how to put him in good positions, and Klubnik, the chemistry between those two, it seems like he's made Brown a better player and Brown's made Klubnik a better player. So building off of each other and showing the ability to elevate the play of people around him, put people in good positions, make correct reads. There was, for example, a read at the end of the Florida State game that, that play is a whole situation of the coaches gave him an option on a play that was a 3rd and short and overtime and shouldn't have had an option at all. But of plays where he had made a bad read or a bad option or a bad decision or something that he would tell you, oh, I missed that. And now we're seeing some better decision-making and some better ability to move the ball down the field. That was the thing last year with Clemson, of the big plays weren't there, the chunk plays, the exciting over-the-top catches or the big runs. It wasn't there. And this year, there's been flashes of throw a ball down the middle of the field to Tyler Brown, touchdown, or try to find a guy in the pylon, touchdown. And we've been able to see the way that Clemson can move the ball down the field, Klubnik become aggressive. So, yeah, he is inconsistent. He doesn't have the experience yet, but it's one that I feel confident in the future that this is going to be a guy that gives the ACC a run for its money. But right now, it's another one of just so many ups and downs. It's trending up, but there's still, you'll see something and say, oh, freshman mistake, can he respond? And generally game over game he has. Yes.
Well, speaking, with him being a freshman quarterback, this kind of bleeds into my next question I have for you is, in your opinion, what do you feel the Clemson's offensive plan is going to be against Miami's defense? Do you feel it's going to be a run heavy scheme, or do you think they're going to test the DBs early?
Yeah, for me, I'm looking more run heavy with Clemson. And this is another point of contention. You've done a really good job of hitting on things that are not a black or white answer in terms of your questions, because this is another one that, what does a Riley offense look like? You look at the past 3 years, you'll give me you'll have a definition of, okay, air raid, this. What does it look like at Clemson? It's not that. And some of it you could say is personnel, some of it's Dabo. Yeah, there it is. I didn't know if I should get too far into that play, but Ronald, you're dead on there. But yeah, when we're looking at, they call it a dirt raid at Clemson instead of the air raid. So there's some questions of, hey, you bring in Riley, and is this even his offense? Is it totally his offense? Do we care? And to me, I'm like, let Riley be Riley, let him air it out. But it seems like Sweeney really wants the dirt raid, and Riley understands that with Will Shipley and Phil Maffa, who we haven't talked much about yet, the running backs are good. Shipley is definitely an NFL type of talent, not someone that I think is, he's not like a first-round pick. He's not going to go change a franchise immediately, but he's somebody that he's a former 5-star, I believe, a 24/7 composite, if you want to fact check on that. But former 5-star, and one that came out of North Carolina. People have known about him for a while. Big fan favorite. Ship happens is a common phrase that you might hear from some Clemson people around you if he scores. You might see it on a tweet here and there. But Shipley is one that in the run game, they want to start with him. He has an ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. Don't use it a ton, but he can. Someone you'll see in the NFL, someone that is utilized at Clemson a lot. Sometimes in the red zone now, they don't go to him quite as much as maybe expected or they used to, because of a now quarterback sneak that they like to run on the goal line, or Phil Maffa just because of his size. But he's one that's a little shiftier. Maffa is a little more of the big back. He's one that when he breaks away, sometimes you catch him from behind, but you'll take it because every time he does that, he'll go bowl over a couple of people on the goal line, and then you say, okay, that's our guy. So the run game for Clemson is generally where things start. That's a pretty safe bet. Now, passing the ball is one that, as some of the commenters have mentioned, it's inconsistent. So it'll be tried early and just kind of feeling things out of where it goes. But Miami, in terms of DB talent, I know has got a couple of safeties that I've got on the draft board list as being top 150 guys. So I know that matchup will be a little tougher. It'll be tougher to get over the top of that defense, just looking at things on paper. I'd look at some X factors at receiver if you want names for Clemson. Bo Collins has had every opportunity to become an alpha player, and he could be an NFL player, but every opportunity to say, I'm the man. And he had a big game earlier in the season. I think it was Charleston Southern. It went for 100 plus and had a touchdown, but it's flashes, and we've seen flashes, and it's just, can you be the number one? Because you've got the size, you got the talent, you've got the pedigree. But that's one that I'm looking to. If he can go up and against the DBs against Miami, can you go up? Can you make things happen? That's the key. Because Tyler Brown's going to have catches. He's going to likely get his, as we say. If he's going to have a couple of plays that Miami fans are going to say, oh, yeah, this kid he's got a little something to him. He's like some of the skill players that y'all have seen in the past, of the shiftiness, and can be a little fun to watch if he's able to get loose. And you'll see him maybe return some punts as well. So he's going to have a couple of moments. We'll see how big they are. Bo Collins, he's an X factor. And then you take a look around at everybody else, and Antonio Williams could be somebody that goes for 100 yards on any given day. He's a freshman All-American. So there's options there, but it's inconsistent, and you don't really know what you're going to get if you're Clemson. So there's a bunch of names to keep an eye on as a Miami fan, but not anyone that I'd circle and tell you, oh, there's, no chance you're stopping him. You got to double team this guy. That's not true with this year's Clemson team. And if you haven't watched Clemson in a while, it might be a little hard for you to say, oh man, I'm not used to that, but that's where it is. That's this matchup.
Luke, Dabo Sweeney, past games with Miami, has dominated the Miami Hurricanes. I mean, it's not even close. He owns the Canes. What's your prediction? Saturday, Clemson heads to Hard Rock Stadium to take on the Miami Hurricanes. Does Dabo Swinney destroy the Hurricanes again in Hard Rock Stadium like he did when Brad Kaya was quarterback, or is it a lot closer?
I see this one as a close game. I really think the cool element for competitive balance, if you're a neutral fan watching this, is the fact that it's at Hard Rock and it's not in Death Valley. If it's in Death Valley, I'd say, well, I'd probably go Clemson by a touchdown. But since it's at Hard Rock, I'll go Clemson by 3. I'd say maybe like a 27-24 kind of game. Don't let it come down to field goal kicking now. I'll tell you that, because
you should have just stayed in New York, that guy.
Well, which one, right?
The one that was going to grad school in New York or had an internship.
Why?
He should have stayed there. Why come back?
Man, I mean, down there, FSU game, I was fortunate enough to be on the sideline, and I was down there with some of the photographers that I've gotten to know over the past year or two. And I think after the missed kick, I can still feel it almost in my shoulder of one of them just grabbed my shoulder. It was like a death grip of like, what just happened? This is incredible. What in the world? Why can't they make a kick? It was like a 31-yard kick. And that's how
perfect.
It became. I guess if I see it,
Pixar Disney movie, if he makes the kick.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, prepare the documentaries.
Was getting ready. Somebody in Hollywood was just writing the script, getting ready.
Yeah, this is one, to me, I don't see it being a barn burner. I also don't see it being some kind of defensive, like a 17-14 or even a 17-12 like Clemson just had against Wake Forest. Yeah, Ronald, 31-24, I could see that. My only thing, I said 27-24, and now I'm like, wait, Clemson's got to make 2 field goals. I don't know about that. I mean, part of my thing here is just, being real with you all and being real with Miami fans of like, this Clemson team, yes, it's good. Yes, it's talented. Yes, half the defense is probably going to be in the NFL in the next year, if not 2 years. Offensively, Klubnik's on his way up. Shipley's going to be in the NFL. The offensive line is not good, but it's can be serviceable to win. So it's just saying that, while Clemson's not a world-beating team, there's been plenty of disappointment this year. They're still very talented. I think they can pull it together. In the ACC right now, they're out to a slow start. I think that this stops here, but it doesn't mean that we get an uncompetitive game. I just would not be prepared to say that just because of respecting Miami's talent and looking at the fact that Clemson's strength and Miami's strength really match up well. It's just straight up against each other who's the better team, but I'll take Clemson just by a little bit. I think that they've still got a little bit of an edge over Miami, but as you've seen, the gap is closing. There might be a time where the gap has closed if Clemson's not able to fix some things, but coming off the bye week as well, that's something that I think goes in Clemson's favor, especially offensively. Every week is another step in the maturation of the offensive line having to fuse together with a player out for the season, and then the receivers having to figure out and establish chemistry with Klubnik, and then Klubnik continuing to mature as a quarterback. Again, week by week, I feel like he takes a little step forward. So while both teams, I think, are fairly even, I'll give it Clemson by 3. I'm going to have to stick with 27-24. I don't know about the 2 field goals. I guess I'll say they'll do it. 27-24, 3 touchdowns, 2 field goals for Clemson. That's the way I see it. And I think this is one in the fourth quarter that all of us are going to be on the edge of our seat. So we'll see how that take ages.
Ross, what do you think? What's your prediction?
My prediction for this game is fairly similar. I see this being a little bit closer of a battle than it has been in the past, and that's a good thing for Miami. While I don't see Miami winning this game, I do see it coming out to something more like 30-37. That's kind of where my prediction is laying at right now.
Yeah, I agree with Ross as well as with Luke. I think this is actually not going to be a one-sided game. Usually when Trevor Lawrence was quarterback, those were ugly times for Miami and Kelly Bryant that game and probably years past. But no, I think this time it's actually going to be at least a fight competition for Miami. I don't think it's going to be one-sided. If it was one-sided, it goes to Clemson. I don't think Miami's going to be a one-sided and dominate this football game. unless there's a bunch of turnovers and Miami's just scoring pick six, recovering fumbles. And, that's the only way I see it going one-sided, but that's not going to happen. I do have Clemson winning this game 37-27. I do think people are going to get mad at me. I don't care. I think Mario lost half of the fan base the past 2 weeks. I think he's lost part of the locker room as well. Miami does not play well at Hard Rock Stadium. They do not. It's not going to be a sold-out crowd. It's going to be a dead atmosphere. They're not going to be up for this game. Clemson's going to be more fired up. I think Clemson wins by 10.
I can't argue with that one, man. I kind of feel the same way. That's my prediction is 30 to 37, but I can definitely see them winning by more than one score. There's no doubt.
Hope I'm wrong. But the way we played against Georgia Tech was disgusting. The way we played against UNC beats Georgia Tech. We played awful that game. Tyler Van Dyke, I don't know, man. It's weird. He's not the same. I guess he tore some ligaments in his hand. I don't know. That excuse never came up when he was 3-0, 4-0. So it's weird he's jumping ship now with that excuse. Ross, anything else you got for Luke before we wrap it up on tonight's show?
No, man, no. I covered everything I wanted to cover there. I just really, really thank Luke for taking some time out of his night here to join us, man. I truly appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's an honor to be with you.
Appreciate it, Luke. Man, great analysis on Clemson football. Best of luck on Saturday. Luke, where can the good people find you?
Yeah, for me, usually on Twitter, but on all social media, I'm lucky enough that I've got the handles under my name. So it's just at Luke Winstel. It's as you'd see it on your screen, last name Winstel. And usually on Twitter, otherwise, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, I do all that too. So anywhere, but generally the content's on Twitter. We'll see probably, some game reactions and some different stories coming up there on the Twitter account. So that'd be the place.
All right, Luke. Well, thanks a ton for jumping on the scoop, man. We greatly appreciate it. And best of luck come Saturday. Go Canes.
Thank y'all. Have a good one.
See ya.